On the vast African savanna, where the deep blue sky embraced an endless, lush carpet of green grass, there was a persuasive silence. It was the primal rhythm of life, both ancient and vibrant. Helen, a wildlife photographer with a sensitive heart, and Jack, a seasoned ranger with sharp eyes, had come here to seek and document nature's elusive beauty. They sat in their old pickup truck, moving slowly through the tall fields of grass. For Helen and Jack, a golden rule was always observed.
Remember the rule, Helen. Observe only. Do not interfere with the wildlife.
They were witnesses, not rescuers. They believed that, to maintain balance, nature must be allowed to resolve matters on its own. The tranquility under the noon sun led Helen to believe that today would be purely a day of admiring serene, green beauty. But the atmosphere was quickly torn apart by a familiar, yet terrifying sound. The distinct, high-pitched, gruesome laugh of a hyena. Jack immediately raised his binoculars. After a few tense seconds, his expression turned grave. "Something's wrong," Jack muttered. Before them, a pack of hyenas was tightening their circle. But the center of attention was a solitary white speck, standing out against the vibrant green backdrop of the grass. It was Leo, the albino lion cub. His pure white coat, a genetic marvel, ironically became a danger signal against the bright green of life. Leo trembled, the fragile image a tragic story about to conclude. In that moment, Helen's and Jack's scientific objectivity dissolved. They knew they could not just stand by and watch. The scene unfolding before Helen and Jack was not just a normal hunt. It was the cruelty of nature aimed at a defenseless creature. Leo, the albino cub, was the embodiment of fragility. With his white coat providing no camouflage, he stood out like a beacon amidst the green, making him an easy target. His sensitive pink eyes squinted in the sunlight, and this rarity had placed him in a harsher survival battle than any of his siblings. Jack thought to himself, the cub is the definition of an outsider, a creature fighting a fate that nature seemed to have already sealed. Jack and Helen looked at each other, their faces reflecting extreme tension. This was where the line between principle and compassion blurred. Conservation law always required them to respect the ecosystem's balance. If they did nothing, it would simply be a natural conclusion. But looking into Leo's frightened pink eyes, Helen's scientific objectivity completely vanished. She held her camera tight, unable to press the shutter. She whispered, her voice choked, Jack, we can't just stand by and watch the little guy alone on that green grass." Jack, who had witnessed countless life-and-death events on the savannah, understood the weight of this moral dilemma. He knew that the survival of an albino cub separated from its pride and surrounded by hyenas was nearly zero. He spoke, his voice resolute. "We cannot interfere with death, but we can interfere with injustice. If we turn our backs, history will record this as the day a rare miracle was destroyed." Their exchange was merely a look, but contained a silent vow, transcending all written rules. They decided to act, driven by the strongest protective instinct and the belief that kindness must still have a place, even in the wild. "All right," Jack said, his voice low. "We are going to save Leo." They quickly prepared. Jack opened the truck bed, retrieving flares, a siren, and necessary safety equipment. Helen picked up a long wooden stick, her hands trembling but gripped with determination. Their plan was not to injure the hyenas, but to persuade them to abandon the prey by creating a distraction, a window of grace. They had to act as a threat. The pickup truck began to roll, approaching the hyena circle at the slowest possible speed, demonstrating absolute caution. The hot air on the savannah became heavier than ever. The hyenas had noticed the human presence. They began to snarl, their eyes reflecting ferocity, tightening the circle around Leo. The entire field of lush green grass now became a battlefield of compassion and wild survival instinct. Tension peaked, signaling an uncompromising confrontation. The moment Jack decided to act, caution was replaced by resolve. The vehicle stopped just far enough from the hyenas to create pressure. Helen and Jack stepped out of the truck, two small figures facing dozens of fierce predators. The hyena's growling was deafening, but Jack maintained a calm demeanor. Jack raised his hand, aimed straight up at the sky, and fired the first flare. The loud explosion tore through the noon silence, the sudden, blinding red light like an electric shock. The hyenas flinched, many backing away, but their leader still bared its fangs, its red eyes showing vigilance and annoyance. The flare is a question mark thrown into their certainty, Jack thought. It caused no physical harm, but it created a strong psychological barrier. Next came Helen. She had no weapons other than the wooden stick and her voice. She yelled loudly, a cry of authority and anger, and slammed the stick hard onto the ground. The resounding noise created an invisible pressure, an auditory barrier that further unsettled the hyenas. All fierce eyes turned to the two humans. The hyena leader hesitated, weighing the risk against the reward. Seeing the pack still hadn't dispersed, Jack decided to deliver the decisive blow. He fired a second flare, this time lower, closer to the ground. The explosion was louder, the light stronger, and combined with the unwavering presence of the humans, it finally broke their morale. Panic spread quickly. The hyenas in the back began to turn and run, seeking escape into the bush. The hyena leader hesitated for a few seconds, growling helplessly, but was then forced to retreat, having lost the advantage of the threat. Silence descended abruptly. Helen and Jack remained in a state of alert, waiting a few minutes to ensure the danger had completely passed. When they were certain the hyenas were far away, Helen cautiously approached Leo. The cub was still trembling, his white coat stained with green grass and dirt. He looked at her with fear and exhaustion. She knelt down and gently picked Leo up. He was so small and light, a trembling bundle of life in my arms. Helen later recounted emotionally. The real battle wasn't defeating the hyenas, but conquering the fear that had eroded Leo. They quickly placed Leo into a prepared rescue cage in the back of the truck. With absolute gentleness, Helen took clean water from her backpack, poured it into a bottle cap, and offered it to Leo's mouth. The cub desperately licked every drop of water, a small but moving detail, symbolizing life being revived. Jack examined Leo's body. Fortunately, there were no deep bites, only severe exhaustion and dehydration after the long chase across the savannah. Watching Leo slowly stabilize in the cage, Helen and Jack knew they had completed the rescue mission. But the work was not over. The biggest challenge lay ahead: how to get Leo home. With Leo safely in the cage, the mission's focus shifted from rescue to reunion. Helen and Jack understood that Leo's survival in the wild depended entirely on his pride, especially his mother. His difference in coat color made him vulnerable, and if he were lost for too long, his chances of survival would decrease with every hour. Jack said, thoughtfully, "We saved Leo from death, but without his family, he is still just a ghost lost in the green of life. Our job is not finished." They began to drive slowly across the lush green savannah. Jack relied on his experience and extensive knowledge to read the signs: fresh tracks, scents, and the pride's preferred resting spots. Inside the truck, Helen frequently glanced back at Leo. He was trembling less, his pink eyes looking out with intense anticipation, as if searching for a familiar figure. Every tiny whimper from Leo was a reminder that we were only temporary guardians on his journey, Helen thought. Many hours passed under the sun. Jack's patience was finally rewarded. He stopped the car abruptly upon spotting a pride of lions relaxing in the shade of an ancient acacia tree. The scene was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos earlier. Helen's heart pounded. The most crucial moment was approaching. They briefly discussed the risks. Approaching a large pride is always dangerous, but there was a greater risk: rejection. Sometimes, wild animals can reject physically different young, viewing them as a burden or an anomaly. Would the mother lion recognize and accept Leo, the cub with the strikingly white coat, against the vibrant green grass? Both Helen and Jack felt heavy. They had done everything they could. Now, They had to entrust Leo's fate to maternal love and the species' instinct. "We need to maintain a distance. We must not disturb the pride," Jack reminded her. They carefully placed the rescue cage on the ground in a clear but safe position for observation. Helen's hand trembled slightly as she opened the cage door. Then, both quickly retreated to the truck to observe from afar. They had to give the pride space and dignity. This was the moment nature had to sort itself out. But this time, nature had been granted a gentle leverage of hope brought by two humans. All that remained was to wait and hope that the miracle they had saved would be welcomed by its family. The wait was in absolute silence. Helen's and Jack's eyes were glued to the cage a distance away. The cage door opened and Leo stepped out. The albino cub hesitated for a moment, his white figure standing out against the green grass, then let out a faint but hopeful cry, directed towards the resting pride. That cry, though small, carried the strength of kinship. The pride's reaction was immediate and powerful. A lioness in the pride sprang up as if jolted by electricity. There was no confusion or rejection in her eyes, only recognition and intense maternal instinct. She rushed over, not with a predator's ferocity, but with the speed of unconditional love. The reunion moment was deeply moving. The mother lion approached and gently rubbed her head against Leo, then licked the cub's white coat clean as if to wash away all the fear and dust of his wandering journey. Leo nestled into his mother's chest, his body no longer trembling. It was a powerful image of safety and liberation. The next incredible action was that of the entire pride. The other lions stood up and slowly circled the mother and Leo, forming a natural protective ring, completely accepting the different albino cub. Leo's difference was no longer a death sentence, but a highlight embraced by love. Jack's whisper reached Helen's ear. Maternal love sees no color. The fear of rejection has been replaced by an absolute circle of protection. Emotions welled up. Helen quietly lowered her camera. These were moments meant to be felt, not necessarily captured. She and Jack smiled, a smile of profound relief and satisfaction. As the pickup truck began to roll away, leaving a reunited wild family under the gentle sun on the green grass, Helen knew this story would change how she viewed her work. Her final narration echoed. We learned that intervention, when driven by pure compassion for vulnerable creatures like Leo, is not about breaking the laws of nature, but upholding the highest law, the law of empathy. We all have a Leo in our lives, a fragile moment, a different person, and need for help. Leo's story reminds us that compassion is a muscle, and we need to use it. If this story of loving intervention and miraculous reunion has touched your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe to support the vital work of rangers like Jack and help us turn observation into action to protect the rarest creatures on this planet. Thank you for watching.